Revelation chapter 4 this morning. Don't you love it when the pastor says, turn to Revelation? He's like, yeah, I got this. I'm a Bible scholar. I know exactly where that is. And 4, that's right after 3. You know, I was just talking to someone after the first service, and they had this same type of mentality and attitude that I had for a long time, is that Revelation was something to shy away from. But Revelation is not meant to conceal. The book of Revelation is meant to reveal. And in fact, that's what the name of the book means. Even in the Greek word is apocalypsis, and it means to completely lay bare, to present, to show and reveal what is to take place. And so that is what John is instructed to do in this book. It is the revelation. And so in the divine outline found in chapter 1, verse 19, if you don't have it, underline it, highlight it, do whatever you need to do. John is told to write in the divine outline, to write, first of all, the things you have seen. Second, write the things which are. And then third, write the things which will take place after this. And so, almost like a 3-act play, John is told to write these things. First, write the things that you have seen. He's told this in verse 19. What he has seen up to this point is Jesus in his power and glory. It's incredible, it's descriptive, it's amazing, and it's the inspiration for everything that's going to come following this. That is what he has seen. The things which are, if that's chapter 1, the things which are chapters 2 and 3. Jesus instructs John to write 7 letters that he transcribes, 7 letters to 7 churches. And again, a section that has so much rich application for us in our life. Man, we talked about that. We spent 7 weeks looking at those 7 letters to 7 churches. Then thirdly, he is told to write the things which will take place after this. And that Greek word is metatauta. Not quite as much confidence there. Metatauta, after this. And so if it's after this, after chapters 2 and 3 comes chapter 4. And this is the Lord's program. And so we read first words of chapter 4, after these things, or metatauta. After these 7 messages to the 7 churches, this Greek, the chapter 4 begins with this exact same Greek phrase in the divine outline, metatauta, after this, after church history, chapters 2 and 3. And that's exactly what we see. 19 times in the first 3 chapters of Revelation, we see the church mentioned. It's mentioned over and over again, 19 times. But the word church, the church, is not seen again in the book of Revelation. And if you've read through the book of Revelation, you know there's some horrific things coming. That begins in chapter 6, from 6 to 19. But the church isn't mentioned in any of that. The church is off the scene. Now, during this time, we'll see as we study through and continue on, there's going to be a great multitude during those horrific things that take place. There's going to be a multitude of those who place their faith in God, but they're not called the church. They're called the saints, the tribulation saints. They're called the brethren, but they're not called the church. The church is not mentioned because in chapters 4 and 5, where we are, John serves as a picture and a type of the church. And the church is called up to heaven, gathered around the throne. That's what we're going to be looking at today. So he says, after these things, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. Now, if you've been with us through the book of Revelation, through our study so far, I think 3 of the last 4 times that we've been in Revelation, we've seen doors mentioned. In Revelation 3, verse 8, to the church of Philadelphia, Jesus said, you have a door open. It's open for opportunity. It's a door of evangelism. See, I have set before you, he says in Revelation 3:8, an open door, and no one can shut it. And then in chapter 3, verse 20, to the church in Laodicea, we see a door of invitation. Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me. And right now, Jesus is knocking. He's knocking on men's and women's hearts around the globe. He's knocking on men's and women's hearts today, in here, in this room. Let me in. You need me. Enthrone me in your life. Invite me in. And then notice, though, if you're in chapter 3, look at what he says in verse 21. And to him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. Jesus says, if you let me in, if you see what I have for you, and you allow me in, open your heart to me, I'm going to open heaven to you. And so now here we come to this third door. And the one who holds the keys in chapter 1 swings the door of heaven open wide. He says, and the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you things which, note, must take place after this. There's that same Greek word again, twice. In verse 1, metatauta. John says, he's instructed by Jesus, you're done with sections 1 and 2. I have told you the things which you have seen, you have done that, and the things which are, these are the things which must take place after this. So come up here. And again, what John experiences in chapters 4 and 5 is what the church is going to experience before the tribulation. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we're going to be caught up. We are going to be gathered, the flesh and blood into the spiritual. And then back to Revelation, check out what John says. A voice like a trumpet booms, come up here, verse 2, immediately. Not after a little bit. Took a little bit of time. No, immediately I was in the Spirit. Now, can you imagine what that must have felt like for the Apostle John? He's in exile. He's a prisoner on the island of Patmos. He's an old man, just a ratchety old man. You know, he's got a sore back and worn out knees. And if I got something going on with my hip, I'm sure he does, right? I mean, that's why this is not only good news for John who experiences this, it's good news for us. It's good news for you and me. There's a day coming, church, brothers and sisters, when we don't have to struggle with our flesh and blood bodies anymore, where cancer is going to be something of the past, let alone COVID or anything else. We're not going to have the physical things to deal with. We're not going to have the spiritual things to deal with. No more of that Romans 7 type of experience. I don't do the things that I wish I would do, and the things I do are things I wish I didn't do. There's not going to be any more of that because we're going to be caught up, physical to spiritual, called up in that moment. And as John writes in 1 John 3, verse 2, when we see him, we'll be like him. Man, because flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. So immediately, John says, I was in the Spirit, and behold, something grabbed my attention. Behold, a throne set or planted in heaven. John, he's caught up. He's translated in a moment. And one object, if you just wrap your minds around, it's hard to, just what that would even be like, right? But he's just caught up in a moment in the spiritual. And one object has every bit of his attention. It's a throne. The throne. Now, when we think, like maybe growing up in church, out of the church, you dream about what heaven might be like, the things that you might experience, right? Of all the things that John could have described right off the bat, pearly gates, streets of gold, what he is impressed by is a throne. That's what grabs him. Behold, a throne. And as we're going to see in the next 2 chapters in this heavenly scene, everything is in relation to the throne. We're going to see all sorts of prepositions in this chapter, and we'll point those out as we go. And again, this would be important and impactful for those original recipients of the book who were immersed, in a culture of poverty and slavery and heresy and immorality and persecution. People were dying. And so even if things were unpleasant back at Patmos, even if things were out of control at the 7 churches, there is one in control. There is the throne. So it's not only an important reminder to those original recipients, friends, this is an important reminder to you and I here this morning. Because things might seem in disarray in our country. That's not a might. Things are in disarray in our country. We find ourselves in a world surrounded by things over sex, right? Everything's sex and glamour and heresy and persecution and all of that. We're just inundated with that all the time. But while all of that nonsense is going on, while these crazy laws are being passed, the real authority is there. The throne is set in heaven. It's set, it's planted, it's not moving, it's secure. What an amazing comfort we have. There is a throne and it isn't going anywhere. And it is occupied. John says, and one sat on the throne. What makes the throne a big deal to John is the one who sat on the throne. God is on the throne. He's ruling, he's reigning. He's even now, he's working all things to good according to his will. Our God reigns right now. And so if our culture has turned its back on God, mock our worldview, intimidate us, society may slander us, tell us that we should live in fear. They've been doing that for a couple years. But our God is on the throne, and we don't need to live in fear. That's our sovereign. And notice this, guys. I don't want to pass this up. He's sitting. The work is done. And he's not up there pacing back and forth, wrenching his hands. Would you look at Tad? Oh, my goodness. What am I going to do with that guy? Didn't see that coming, right? I didn't see 2020, 2021, 2022. I didn't see all this nonsense happening. No, he's not anxious. The work is done. It's complete. He's sitting down. It is finished. Everything is in control. And now in verse 3, John tries to describe this one who occupies the throne. It says, and he who sat there was like jasper and sardius stone in appearance. Just trying to describe God, obviously, is not an easy task. But notice, he's doing his best to describe the indescribable. And so we've talked about this in Revelation before. There's a lot of uses of it was like, it was as if, and that's what he's doing here. It's like jasper and sardius stone. And if you take notes, I encourage you to, this should take us back to Exodus chapter 28. We find those same two stones mentioned in Exodus chapter 28. They are found in the breastplate of the high priest. Oh, when it's my son, I got to call you out. That's what you get for being in the front row, man. PKs. It's as red as I've ever seen you. It's awesome. Speaking of red, the sardius stone. The sardius stone was bright red, as Elijah's face. No, it was like a ruby. Picture a ruby, okay? The high priest's breastplate had these 12 stones that represented the 12 tribes of Israel. And this bright red ruby-like stone represented the tribe of Reuben. The jasper stone, as your margin may say, it's like a diamond, okay? Your translation, your margin may actually say that. And that stone stood for the tribe of Benjamin. Reuben and Benjamin, the first and the last sons of Jacob. Also, check out the meaning of their names. Reuben means behold the son. It was his first son, right? Behold the son. Benjamin, as you may know, is son of my right hand, son of my strength. That's what it means. That was the end of his life. He's like, look at this. I still produced a son, the son of my strength. And so on the throne, the first, the last, the Alpha, the Omega, behold the son of my strength. And so John, he's caught up to heaven and the throne and the one on the throne. All his attention is on that one. And as we go through Revelation, there's going to be lots of interpretations. We've talked about this. There's people in this room that have different ways of interpreting this book. There's one thing that we can all agree on. Right now, church, there is one occupying the throne, and our God rules and reigns. So, John sees the Lord on the throne. Now, around the throne, and there was a rainbow, he says, around the throne, in appearance like an emerald. Okay? Around the throne, a halo, a rainbow. Rainbow, the symbol and epitome of grace, which is so appropriate. The book of Hebrews tells us that Jesus sits on a throne of grace. And what he's describing, it's like an emerald. It's like what Ezekiel tries to describe in Ezekiel 1. Again, if you take notes, Ezekiel 1, we're going to put this up on the screen. Ezekiel wrote, also, from the appearance of his waist and upward, I saw, as it were, the color of amber with the appearance of fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward, I saw, as it were, the appearance of fire with brightness all around, like the appearance of a rainbow in a cloud on a rainy day. So was the appearance of the brightness all around. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Here too, John sees this rainbow encircling the throne, 360 degrees, this symbol of promises kept. Also around the throne, verse 4, were 24 thrones. And on those 24 thrones, I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their head. Now, we're going to see these elders mentioned throughout the book of Revelation. And I'll be the first to admit, we can't say with 100% certainty who they are. There is a lot of opinions about who is sitting on these 24 thrones. Some would say it's just more angelic beings. Others would say it's the 12 apostles and the 12 patriarchs. Still, others would say they're just representative of the church. Now, it's interesting, again, if you take notes, lots of cross-references today. The only other time in this whole book that the number 24 is used is in 1 Chronicles 24. And I don't mean because the chapter is 24. The word 24 is found in 1 Chronicles 24, where there's 24 groups of priests that are assigned to serve and worship in the temple and to represent God's people. That was their duty of those 24, was to represent the people in worship there in the temple, serving and worshiping God. And as Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 2, we're a kingdom of priests. Those 24 worshiping day and night. Peter says we're a kingdom of priests. And so it would seem as though these 24 elders represent all of God's people before the throne. They're wearing white robes, golden crowns, but not for long. But perhaps the most important thing about these elders, and if you have a heart for service and ministry, and I know a lot of you guys do, God bless you for that. If you have a heart for service and ministry, take notice to what they're doing as we continue to study through the book of Revelation. This is the first time we're reading about these guys, but we're going to see them mentioned in chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 7, chapter 11. We're going to see these guys and notice what they're doing throughout. We're going to see them comforting others. We're going to see them offering prayer. We're going to see them explaining truth. And we're going to see them, as they are here in the throne room, worshiping. They're worshiping. God is on the throne. Around the throne, there's a rainbow and 24 elders and 24 thrones. And then, verse 5, from the throne. From the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices. This could be a preview of the judgment that we're about to encounter in chapters 6 through 19. But this is reminiscent of Mount Sinai. If you've read through that account in Exodus as the Israelites were gathered there around Mount Sinai, Moses went up. You can write as a cross-reference, Exodus 19, verse 16. Also mentioned there, there's thunderings and lightnings and voice. It just speaks of the impressive awe and power associated with the presence of God. So on the throne, around the throne, from the throne, and now before the throne. Everything is in relation to the throne. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. As we read through the book of Revelation, we're going to see there's lots of symbolism, right? Much of it is related to the Old Testament. And Hebrews 9 tells us that one of the functions of the tabernacle, it had some practical applications, right? The tabernacle did. But one of its functions was to serve as a model of heaven. It was the place people came to worship, and it was symbolic of heaven. And so in the Old Testament, the tabernacle, as you come into the holy place, the entrance was from the east. And so as you came in, and on the left, there was this 7-branched menorah, right? The 7-branched lamp. It was constantly lit. It was the only illumination within the holy place. And here, John sees in the true tabernacle, he says 7 lamps. And there's no speculation this time. It's not, it was like this. This is the 7 spirits of God. Again, we talked about this in chapter 1, quickly what the 7 spirits are. There's a reference to Isaiah chapter 11, right, where the Spirit of the Lord, wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, fear. And so here, this Holy Spirit, everything that's done around is lit. It's fueled by the Holy Spirit. Also now, next preposition, before the throne. Before the throne, verse 6, there was a sea of glass like crystal. Again, as you entered the Old Testament tabernacle, as you entered the courtyard itself, was this large brass laver, this big, great basin. And it's where those who were ministering to the Lord and for the Lord cleansed themselves. It's where they removed the dirt, the dust, the things of the earth, the things of the world were washed off. In heaven, though, this water isn't troubled. It's not moving. It's still. It's done. The washing's done. It's complete. They're robed in white. 100% clean. The filth is removed. The sea is as glass. Next proposition, middle of verse 6. In the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures full of eyes in front, back. The first living creature was like a lion. The second living creature was like a calf. The third living creature had the face like a man. And the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. Okay? We could spend a lot of time diving in, talking about seraphim here, cherubim, right? Angelic beings. The lion is the mightiest of the wild animals. The ox is the calf, the strongest of the domesticated animals. The eagle is the highest flying thing. And man is the epitome of all creation. But along with their faces and eyes, it says in verse 8, the 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, which are full of eyes around and within. So what they look like, I mean, we could spend a lot of time. It's fascinating, right? A lot of speculation here. And so what they look like is not as important, though, as what they're doing. They do not rest day or night, saying, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. There is one object, as John is called up to heaven, that demands his attention. It's the throne. And the word throne appears 17 times in these next 2 chapters, 46 times in the book of Revelation itself, and everything is in relation to the throne. All of these, right? God is on the throne. Around the throne was a rainbow, the throne, 24 thrones and elders. From the throne, lightning, thunder, voices, verse 5. Before the throne, there was lampstands, a sea of glass. In and around, in the midst of the throne, 4 living creatures. There's one object at the center of this whole heavenly scene, and everything is in relation to the throne. But there's one objective: to worship the one on the throne. That's the purpose of all of this. Verse 9, whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever. Whenever that happens, verse 10, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. And they cast their crowns before the throne, saying, you are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. These angelic creatures are the worship leaders. And they speak, they declare the attributes of God. They speak of his transcendence, his otherness. There's no one and nothing like our God. He is holy. He doesn't fit in a category. He's holy, holy, holy. They speak of his sovereignty, his authority, his power, his might. He is Lord God Almighty. They speak of his immutability, his eternality. He is who was and is to come. And when they do that, when that happens, John says, as we read, the 24 elders, they fall on their face. And then there's one more preposition. God's people cast their crowns before the thrones. It's an act of worship, an act of recognition that anything that I have, any reward that's been given to me, it's all out of your amazing grace. This crown that you're the King of Kings, that you have given to me. You're the one that sits in the throne. I'm giving it back to you because you're worthy. So they cast their crowns. And then again, verse 11, we already read, they proclaim, you're worthy, O Lord, to receive glory, honor, power. You created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. When we are around others, it inspires us to worship. And that's one of the things that's great about being in fellowship, to being in community. To come here on a Sunday morning is to encourage one another in lots of ways, but to encourage one another in worship. Jesus told the disciples to pray, on earth as it is in heaven. And in heaven, the worship does not stop. The worship goes on and on and on, and his attributes are proclaimed, and his worthiness is proclaimed, and it just goes on and on and on. But if I am honest with myself, and maybe this is you as well, sometimes I can be indifferent to worship. Sometimes that's not elevated in my life. I'm praying to have it be on earth as it is in heaven, but I can be indifferent to worship. And guys, my attitude and your attitude towards worship now, it's an indicator of how ready we are for heaven. If we're going to spend eternity in worship, wouldn't it make sense to start worshiping now, to be worshiping people right now? God is worthy of our worship, not just someday, but today. So let's live as God's people, as if even if our life is spinning out of control, even if our circumstances are pressing and hard and difficult, and our emotions are all over the place and straining, and our relationships are difficult, there is one on the throne right now that is worthy of our praise, and he is reigning and worthy of our worship. You're worthy, O Lord, to receive glory, honor, and power. You created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. He created all things. What do you give a God who has all things? Your heart, your adoration, the one thing that by our fleshy nature is not in submission to him. Let's give him our worship. These things, the Lord said in verse 1, must take place. And as we close, these coming events, they're not things that are left to chance that might take place. These are things that after this, they can't be stopped. And so if you've read through chapters 6 through 19, and the horrific things that are going to take place, those must take place. But also, the wonderful events found in 4 and 5, this wonderful event must take place, worshiping God at his throne with all of creation. And the choice is up to us. We are all going to experience, there's no exclusions. We're all going to experience one of those or the other of those. Either way, these things must take place. And I encourage you to choose heaven if you have not done so. Some of you may be here this morning and you're like, I am so ready for heaven. But there maybe are some others of you who are like, I'm not even sure of where I'm going. I don't know, I want to tell you this morning, heaven has, as we read, an open door policy. Before John was around the throne, he had to go through the door. There was a door open. And Jesus tells us in John chapter 10, I am the door. We go through that door. If I'm speaking to you, about you this morning, we go through that door by understanding we're sinners. We've done wrong. We've thought, said, did things that are contrary to who God is and his ways. We recognize that and that Jesus died on the cross as a payment for that, for those wrong things. And so we go through that door by saying, I'm repenting, I'm turning from those wrong things, and I'm turning to Jesus. I'm not going to live perfectly, but I'm going to live a lifetime of turning from things to Jesus. That's how we go through that door. And when we do, when we walk through that, man, heaven is open before us. So I'm going to have the worship team come up, and we're going to celebrate.